For those listening for the first time, I have my first sponsor, and I could not think of a better one than mempool.space, a fantastic Bitcoin block explorer. We are still using Wiz's mempool here, but like most things in my life, I'm moving towards free and open source software, and you get that with this Bitcoin block explorer. So you do not need to trust Wiz's mempool, i.e. mempool.space. You can easily host it yourself. More to come on this front at the park in 2023. But mempool is becoming much more than your traditional block explorer. It is becoming a multi-layer explorer from layer 0 mempool, layer 1 the Bitcoin blockchain, layer 2 plus like Lightning, Liquid, and more. And that more part is for those interested in Bitcoin mining. They have a robust mining dashboard, which I check every day. So give it a shot yourself at mempool.space. My second show supporter, and it is Blockstream Jade. Blockstream Jade is an open source hardware wallet for the cold storage of Bitcoin and Bitcoin layer 2 assets on Liquid, such as stablecoins and security tokens. I personally only use my Blockstream Jade for storing Bitcoin, but that is me. Blockstream Jade houses a camera and full color display, allowing for fully air-gapped Bitcoin transactions. You can scan and display QR codes directly on the device to sign transactions and verify addresses with ease and peace of mind. You can manage your assets from mobile or desktop with Jade-compatible wallets such as Blockstream Green, Blue Wallet, Electrum, and my personal choice and favorite, Sparrow. Go to blockstream.com/Jade, Jade, to learn more and also buy one if you're so inclined.
It's logistically complicated to fund people. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to issue grants, and very methodical approach that Connor and everyone on the team who's involved take to funding people. And so I think we can do a better job of kind of having more of a playbook to answer any questions that people might have to what we've done, and to kind of make it easier for other people to start up something similar. But I also think that's a great way too for people who want to contribute to Bitcoin and they're not necessarily a developer or designer, they don't know how. But if you're interested in funding people, that is a great way to get involved and help rally support and take away that logistical pressure to make it possible and more easier to pay people.
Welcome to the Builders in Bitcoin podcast, a podcast about the people who bring Bitcoin to life. I'm your host, Rod, and I go by the handle BitKite on Twitter, and I'm also on Nostr. You can find my NPub pinned to my Twitter profile. I had the pleasure of talking with Haley Berkoe, program manager at Spiral. Haley is a prime example of someone leveraging non-technical skills to make a valuable contribution to the Bitcoin ecosystem, demonstrated through her ability to facilitate and manage open source projects and the developers behind them. In this episode, we discuss and dig into the goals and responsibilities of a program manager, the importance of facilitation in removing logistical pressure from developers, how to proliferate open source grant programs and build community, and a whole lot more. I really enjoyed my conversation with Haley, and I hope you will too. So let's just jump right in. Haley, welcome to the Builders in Bitcoin podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well as well. And it was great to finally meet you in person last week here in Nashville, Tennessee. It was an honor to host you and the entire Spiral team. So hopefully you guys found it productive and an awesome time.
Yeah, it was great to meet you and so many other people at Bitcoin Park. And it was so great to be there and see all the energy and all the things going on that you don't maybe see on a day-to-day.
Yeah, totally. And I think especially, well, not especially working in the open source community, but I will, typically there's not a space or you're often meeting with your colleagues in person. And so having that opportunity, whether it's once a year, once a quarter, to kind of get together, to hash it out, to have a beer, to socialize, I truly do think it goes a long way.
Yeah, it definitely does. The Spiral team tries to get together roughly 3 times a year, and people are going to different conferences and stuff. But it's definitely really amazing to meet people outside of Spiral and other open source projects. So I love that Bitcoin Park kind of is an area where everyone comes to. And so it's really fun to meet a bunch of people that I had never met in person before.
We're going to dive into that a little later on for sure. But I do want to ask how the heck does someone like yourself get in? Because there's a spectrum here, and let me tee you up, because there's, for me at least, I worked in the corporate world, corporate tech world, and I'm now very, very fortunate to have my time, capital, and reputation all in on Bitcoin. But you took it even one step further, right? And now you're devoted all of those things, and I'm not putting words in your mouth, and now you're working in the open source Bitcoin world. Like, how did you get to this point that you're working at Spiral full time?
Yeah, my journey to Spiral is kind of funny and unique, but yeah, now I'm a program manager at Spiral. I used to be an executive assistant, which, if you don't know what that is, you basically support executives and their teams doing operational work and then calendar management and events and things like that. So I did that at Block, which was known as Square. I was on various teams for 2.5 years as an executive assistant. And then I also worked at 2 startups prior to that as an executive assistant. So I have a lot of background as an executive assistant. And as an executive assistant, you do wear various hats, and especially in the startup land, you're doing lots of things. You have to be proactive. You work with lots of different personality types. You're kind of the person that's behind the scenes that gets stuff done and just makes things run smoothly, doing operational work, project management, etc. And I love that, but I'd always kind of wanted to do something different and get more involved with projects versus the kind of calendar management. Executive support side is fun but time consuming. So it had been something that I had thought about for a long time, and it actually took me about a year to find a new job. I really wanted to stay within Block if I could, and I had made various connections and networked a lot through kind of the various teams that I supported, and kind of just made it a journey to at least meet with 1 to 2 people per week for about a year to kind of explore different opportunities at Block and different teams. So I learned about a lot of different teams, and I had met Steve Lee probably like a year and a half before I started looking for a new job. And he does not have an executive assistant, but he needed help with the Bitcoin Optic event. And I had the time, so I met him through that, and I helped plan the Bitcoin Optic event.
Nice.
I think in 2019. And that's how I learned about Bitcoin, honestly, was through Steve and the Bitcoin Optic event. And he used to go around to different teams and teach them about Bitcoin and do kind of like book club reviews. And so he came to a lot of the different teams that I support. So I heard his spiel a bunch of different times, and it grabbed my interest. I love working with smart, passionate people, and I don't think I've ever met anyone who loves their job as much and is so passionate as Steve is about Bitcoin and what he does. So through my process, I was learning about Bitcoin and kind of reached out to him, and from there we kind of created this role.
So that's how you got into Bitcoin was, hey, Steve is coming around. You helped him with the Bitcoin Optic. By the way, was that event in San Francisco?
Yeah.
Okay, in 2019?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I mean, I'd heard about it, but I had not gone down the rabbit hole, and for no really reason in particular. But then when I did in person see him and other people like so passionate about it, that's when I kind of started to learn more and kind of learn about what Square Crypto, which is now called Spiral, what they do. And so, yeah, that's how I kind of first learned about Bitcoin.
Well, talk about fast tracking directly to like the end point and having Steve and Jack and those resources that were so big, and Miles, and like mission focused on Bitcoin, and also in I feel like a very positive way explaining the differences between Bitcoin, crypto, and the current fiat system, so that it's attainable for someone that has those questions to say, oh, that is in a very welcoming way, if you will. That's awesome. That's a great story. And then Steve, this position just came up, or how did this come about for you to join the Spiral team?
Well, I reached out to him on a whim. Honestly, I didn't even think he was going to reply. And I was basically like, I'm looking for a new role at Block, and here are my strengths. If you think that there could be a position for like a non-technical person on your team and ways to add value, like this is what I can do. I don't know a lot about Bitcoin, but I'm eager to learn, and I'm going to put the time in. And it just happened to be that he had like a whole list of projects that he was thinking about and needed help with. And we started talking for a while, and he kind of grilled me on a few things and kind of gave me some like tester projects, and I dipped my toes in. And then, yeah, basically we kind of created this position. So I've been on the team now for almost 2 years.
So let me back up and like tell the timeline. So you did the Bitcoin OpTech. So that was like your first kind of experiment, you dipping your toe into the Bitcoin world, and then also working with Steve.
Mhm.
And then you kind of maintain that relationship. And by the way, pro tip for whoever's listening that wants to find their next opportunity or challenge or like passion project, continue to network and meet as many people as possible and stay in touch, and don't make it very superficial, but actually try to develop those relationships, because you never know. And then you kind of maintained, from Steve coming into these book clubs and other talks, and then you proactively reaching out to him and then doing some experiments. Now, mind you, I know you're paid, but this is also in your extra time that you were doing this.
Yeah.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah. For about a year, I spent a lot of time talking to various people at Block, outside Block, kind of doing career, kind of just exploratory chats. And so I was working a lot to kind of figure that out. And yeah, even though I didn't know much about Bitcoin, I've always been very just kind of like interested, honestly, in money, and not just from like, like making money, but just being smart about saving money and kind of learning. I learned a lot, took a lot of time to learn about investing years ago. And I've always been the go-to person and my friends just to like help set up like, retirement accounts or, Schwab or just anything money related. That's always been me as kind of like a go-to. So, and I've had lots of conversations with people where it's been confusing. So learning more about Bitcoin, I was like, okay, wow, this is definitely up my alley and interest.
Wow. So you at a younger-ish age, or is this more like college or post-college that you're really interested in money in the sense that of just from a wealth preservation and being really smart about it? Like, I'm just curious to know, like, so there's some kids that were like just, saving nickels and pennies and then stacking them, to hopefully buy like that Nintendo, not to date myself, but I don't know what the cool kids play nowadays, probably like an Xbox or something. But anyways, I digress. To oh, you know what? I actually just want to buy a home eventually. So this is the financial planning that I need to personally do. I'm just curious to know at like what age, because this is such a great segue into Bitcoin, which I think, the lowercase b, is the best asset to preserve my future purchasing power for the things I aspire for in life.
Yeah, it definitely started at a really young age. Basically, my parents told me that if I wanted a car, I was going to have to pay for it, and I really wanted a car. So I bought my first car, and I saved
Rock on.
Yeah, for a long time to buy my car. So I've always had jobs. I used to babysit. I lifeguarded forever. Tutoring, like through high school, like was always working. And I just like in college, I worked, and so I've always just been very like saving mindset with my money. So yeah, that kind of started at a young age, but it wasn't till like my 20s that I kind of was like learning about ways to like gain interest. And I was like, wow, I kind of wish I learned about that, because I had saved all this money and paid zero interest and on anything.
Oh man, we're not going to go through the ills of the fiat system on this podcast, but yeah, I have some battle scars as well. But so now you're at Spiral as a program manager. So what does that entail for you?
It's kind of two parts. So since Spiral is part of Block, I help project manage like a lot of kind of like Spiral specific projects. So like there's our own content and marketing and events and sponsorships and operational things within Spiral. But then I also contribute to various open source projects as like a program manager, project manager, whatever you want to call it. So there's been a lot of different projects that I've worked on, various ones throughout the years that kind of change here and there. So it definitely changes day to day on what I'm doing.
So let me ask you that, because okay, I love Bitcoin. I love my community. I love my family. One thing I also love is time optimization, really being critical about my calendar and where I'm spending my time. And is this the max value of that time? Like 24 hours in a day, try to get 8 hours of sleep. Not happening right now, but I try. And then I'm with those 16 hours, it's like, is this the best use of my time? And for you, and you wrote this in your, I believe in your Medium post, it's like you don't really have a defined role. It's like rolling up to a specific objective, and then you're figuring out as your own kind of boss to figure that out. I'm very, very curious for someone as you who has a very high output threshold because of I experienced it last week with how many things you guys were working on and getting done just here in Nashville. How do you organize like even your day to day?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely changes. Basically, like at Spiral, we try to set quarterly goals. So some projects are, a quarter long, some are ongoing, some are 3 quarters, whatever, 4 quarters long. So we try to aim for long projects, and at the beginning of the quarter, like we each individually sit down with Steve and we kind of talk about like what we're interested in working on, kind of what's maybe something that he's thinking about that we're not. And so we set those quarterly goals and write them down, and then we grade ourselves at the end of the quarter if we
Nice.
did them or not, to like hold ourselves accountable. So I definitely reference that doc quite often to make sure I'm actually doing the things I said I was going to do, because sometimes I forget. I'm like, oh, I said I was going to do that. I'm glad I checked. So that helps. And yeah, we basically have no meetings on our team.
That's awesome.
So it is a little harder to organize your time and get things done during the day.
I will say, potentially someone who used to and I'm not maybe doing a lot of meetings in a past life because that's just the way the corporate world worked. I used to actually like these kind of goals. I'd print them out and tape it to the doors of our office when I was managing some teams and be like, hey, every day we got to look at this, because to your point, I agree. If it's in a Google Doc, how often am I going back into that Google Doc and referencing it? But if it's printed out on a piece of paper and I have to walk by it every single day, so does the team. It makes it, hopefully it makes it more attainable and more focus, if you will. So by the way, just so I get it clear, like there's like probably not half your time, but like there's two parts to your role, where there's the Spiral role, like making sure like Spiral is on track and in general from that whole world. And then there's actually you contributing to open source projects that you're passionate about. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, that's a fair summary.
So where is your passion right now? Where are some of the projects that you're working on?
Some of the projects I'm working on. So I contribute to the Lightning Development Kit, which all of our engineers contribute to, but I do so more in like a content manager way. So I manage the blog post. Getting engineers to write is always a fun activity. The the Twitter account, kind of staying on top of what's going on, case studies, things like that. Continuously learning about LDK. I try to learn about it. And then Bitcoin design community I contribute to. So helping kind of with their conference presence and how we're going to make it easier for developers and designers to collaborate together, how we can improve how they work together, like how we can market the Bitcoin design community better to designers and also to developers, how we can kind of get more commercial projects to also use the Bitcoin design community too. And then there's also the Bitcoin product community, which is newly launched right now. It's just a Discord server, but we're going to be launching blog post, website, kind of social, more formal way. But that's basically a way for people who are not necessarily like a developer or designer to have a space to collaborate, learn from each other. We're trying to get more product manager type people involved in various open source projects to bring more organization, communication, advocacy for resources, things like that. So that's been really fun.
Holy shnikes. Okay. So we got LDK, you got the Bitcoin design community, you got this new community, the Bitcoin product manager community. Like, not to go all the way back to my first question, which is like, how do you organize your time such that you're tracking towards all of these probably aspirational goals?
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I set goals in how I want to contribute to these various projects. So I want to help with marketing and advocacy. And so the ways I contribute to these projects is how can we market and advocate for these projects in a better way. So try to your point, there's like endless ways that you can like contribute to a project, and sometimes Steve has to call us out on that, like, okay, stay a little more focused, because it's just like a rabbit hole. And for people who maybe are wanting to contribute and they're not a developer or designer and don't know where to start, I mean, you can reach out to me or anyone else. There's too many projects, so definitely staying focused into what your focus area is and not getting too distracted.
Totally. One of the tips I've found to be useful, well, a number of tips, but here's a couple. One, just going to your local meetup and just kind of exploring and learning a little bit more about Bitcoin. You'll undoubtedly, if it's a good Bitcoin focused meetup, there will be some open source component to it. But also joining you mentioned, Haley, the Discord. There's a Bitcoin design community Slack. Even if you're a lurker and you feel like you're just a LARP, you're not a LARP. You like lurk in there, just figure out what's going on, what people are working on. There's a lot of community calls, and you guys do a great job of these community calls. Stephen Delorme, shout out to him. He does a great job with the Bitcoin design community calls. There's a number of these that you can just listen in. You don't have to participate. There's no homework or quiz or, call you out. It's very, very welcoming, especially for the non-developers. And that's an area I really want to focus with you on, because I feel like you're doing now getting to better know you. We need more Steve Lees, if you will, in the non-developer community to bring more people in, and then to for an alumni of yours that I'm going to date myself. Do you know who John Stockton is?
Yes.
Okay. You're like John Stockton. You're just throwing out dimes, putting people in the perfect position to be the Karl Malone, if you will, and, be the best they can be. And, you're just John Stockton. That's what I see you in this role, especially with all the different projects that you're working on, which is really, really exciting. So I guess this is for the audience that's listening to this podcast. It's don't be paralyzed by the complexity or where to start. I think it's kind of lurk, and then proactively, to Haley's point earlier, when she went through this process, it was around networking. Reach out to folks. You'd be surprised by the response rate and the type of people that actually will respond to you. I'll get off my soapbox for a second, but I don't know if you had any other thoughts there.
Yeah, the networking and relationship building part is huge. Especially in this type of role, I think a key thing that Steve has done is really connect people within the space, and that a lot of that starts from building different relationships. And I try to do that too, meet with various people. And what I've found is a lot of people, like especially developers, will get, so narrowed into what they're working on, and they do want to do more of that advocacy position. They want to be on podcasts, they want to write, they want to do these things, but that's not their necessarily first priority because they're coding. So something that I try to do is, connect people to be like, hey, you should go on this podcast, or we need to write this blog post. And people don't say no, really, they'll do it. Like last week, I got a lot of different people on podcasts, and that helps raise awareness. And so just kind of being organized and building relationships and connecting people different places, I think can help a lot.
It's really amazing to me. It's to your point, it's not top of mind, but it's like, oh, I should do that. Oh, thanks for teeing that up. Oh, you put it on the calendar? Fantastic. Thanks. Taking the logistical steps off people's plate, even though it may seem, I don't know what the right word is, but so minute or so obvious, it goes a long way, especially some hardcore developers that are just so in it, and then they don't, pop their head up to just get on a podcast. Shout out to Matt. Matt crushed it last week, and thanks to Haley and a lot of folks that were behind the scenes organizing. But I think he recorded 5 amazing Citadel dispatches, one pretty much a day starting on Tuesday last week. So go check those out. I think we had the LDK team, we had the BDK team, we had Steve Lee, we had Casey from ordinals.com, which is separate. And it was, I cannot wait to catch up on it. I feel like I had a cheat code because I got to hang out with everybody and talk to them. But I also get to, so we have a no photos policy here at the park, unless everyone's opted in and so on. But this is our way of capturing the moment is through these podcasts. So thanks again for behind the scenes to make a lot of that happen.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it by saying like taking the logistical pressure off. I definitely feel like that is huge. Like people want to do things, they want to get together, they want to have events, they want to be speaking, they want to be writing, they want to do all these things, but I think logistics do get in the way. And it's interesting with open source community because I feel like a lot of people do join the open source community to kind of get away from, you know, maybe like more like structured, organized things that are more prevalent in corporations. So it's even less of that where you kind of have to step in more, but not to make it like, super corporate or centralized, but just, getting the word out.
Yeah, 100%. It's kind of like this accordion. I feel like there's like the corporate world where we going back to the meetings where it's like your full calendar is like filled with like 30-minute, 1 hour touch base, one-on-one, whatever that takes away from the actual purposeful work. And then you go all the way to this next spectrum, which is one sentence goal and figure out how to get there in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months or whatever, how long the grant is. And then you play this like accordion trying to bring it all together while giving everyone the freedom to make it happen. And then the one point I will make is providing guidelines or guardrails just to set everyone's expectations, I think does go a long way. And I think you do an exceptional job of that as well. To say, all right, here's kind of the game plan for, this event for this week. Here are what we have. Here's all like the FAQs already planned out for you. If you have any questions, here's like hotel options. Here's this. And that's just from a program management standpoint for this. And that's like 90% of like maybe questions for folks that are traveling from out of town, driving in, and so on. And then they're able to maximize their time even more so. And then taking that into these other communities where going on the social Discord, for example, I don't know if this is something that you're involved in, but just helping set the general guidelines or tone, if you will, not to say, hey, inhibit speech, but hey, here's just kind of what this community is about. We're not keyboard commandos. We're not telephone tough guys. That's somewhere else you want to go and vent your, there's Twitter for you over there. We're focused on this project and getting this done and talking about this, project or protocol here in this way.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, like coming from more corporate worlds and kind of having a more formal position is when you come to the open source space and you can definitely bring this like logistical organizational skills, but being conscious about your tone and style to adjust to open source ways. There's ways you speak to people and organize details in the corporate world that like wouldn't go over as well in open source land. So just being mindful of not too corporate with your comms and stuff like that.
Yeah, I kind of get I got to work on that as well because I'm sometimes too direct with the questions and the statements. And then I also am sometimes too loose. So there's like that fine balance, if you will. But that's me. That's something I'm working on. The other area I'm really interested in is like, how do you think about or what are some best ways to get these non-developers into working or spending some of their time in the Bitcoin community, whether it's the design community, potentially this new community, the product management community? Like, what are some of the best ways that you've seen?
I definitely think that it really helps to have grassroots movements like Bitcoin Park, like these type of events are huge and the community is really important. And that's something that's like very unique, especially when honestly, when it comes to like money, like people trying to learn about investing or saving their money or what have you with fiat, like people learn about it, but they're not necessarily like contributing to it. So it's really unique that we can have this community of Bitcoiners where you're working on something that you're really passionate, but you're also using it and it's kind of building all these things. So I think the community is a great way for people to make friends and socialize, which is harder as you're an adult and you're not in college and you're not going into the office and you don't have this like in office like community anymore. And so I think that draws people in is like forming connections. And so whether that's in Slack or Discord or Signal or Telegram, or it's in person at events. It's drawing people in to the community aspect, and then just kind of people who are already in the Bitcoin community, just to be kind of mindful about how they can best draw people in, and not kind of just being like, oh, it's obvious. Like it says Discord on the website, so people know that that's where you go to community. I'm like, I don't think a lot of people know what Discord is, and maybe even developers too. And so just kind of making that more clear that this is where you go, and just not assuming that people know that's where the community is.
Totally. And just some best practices around our meetup and just the park in general. I think follow, like anything in life, consistency and follow up. If you can nail those two, you're probably 90% of the way there for life and living somewhat a successful life, especially professionally. Consistency in terms of your messaging and what you're all about. So at the park, I mentioned the guidelines around Bitcoin, the monetary network, which is the capital B, and then Bitcoin, the lowercase b, being the reserve asset. Every single person that comes to our meetup knows that that's what we're talking about. There's no crypto, there's no altcoins, there's no NFTs, there's no LFTs. By the way, the LFTs was a joke. And then Matt Odell, quick story, he pulls me aside after one time. He's like, dude, what's an LFT? I'm like, oh, I just made that up. I was just like on a riff. He's like, okay. He's like, you stumped me for a second. I'm like, all right, man.
But maybe that'll become a thing.
Oh man, I really hope not. But maybe it does. Like what? So we have non-fungible tokens. We have low fungible tokens, or something like that. Lateral fungible tokens.
Yeah.
But making it in a fun-ish environment where I think I said this at the meetup when Steve and your team was there. I was like, me and Matt want to make this. We have basically 3 hours. This is the best 3 hours that you're going to spend anywhere in the world this month learning about Bitcoin. And we take a lot of pride and responsibility in that. And so we try to make that happen every month with the speakers we invite, the topics we curate, and such. I had a point on that, but I was going off on the whole LFT rant here.
No, I was just going to say too that with forming communities, I really like how Bitcoin Park has Nashville Bit Devs, which is very technical, Socratic seminars. That's great for developers. I can go for a little bit, and then I'm like, okay, you guys lost me when you're talking about bolts and covenants or whatever. And everyone's hand goes up, and I'm like, don't know what that is. But then I like how Bitcoin Park also has events that are a little less technically focused, so it can bring in a different crowd of people. So I think that's important too with communities, is forming various ones that attract different groups, so people just don't feel super lost at the technical events and maybe don't even need to go to those. And there's other events that they can go to that are more interesting to them.
100%. And that's the point I wanted to make, which is we do a different topic every month. So mining in January, FOSS February, and then March is economics incentives, and then the list goes on. Go to our Discord on the left-hand side. You can see all the topics for the next 12 months. And then so we bring, it's just natural. We don't zero in on a specific demographic or socioeconomic background. We just invite everybody and try to make it the most welcoming as possible. And if you kind of take a look at the landscape, if you will, we have very young people. We have actually, well, now he's in college, but he used to be in high school, and he would take 2 buses just to come to our meetups. We have a lot of college students that come to our meetups. We have a lot of elderly people, like retired people that drive in from hours to come to our meetup. And then we have men, women, different backgrounds of people, where they're from. And we didn't focus on this. We just focused on Bitcoin. And it's been really amazing and surprising, if you will. So I guess my point there is sometimes people can go super focused on an area, which is still very good, but taking that first step to be broad and be as welcoming as possible, because you're going to be surprised by who responds, if you will. Does that make sense, Haley?
Yeah, and I think just having a space for people to ask questions and talk about whatever they want is really powerful, because a lot of people, it's pretty intimidating. I think that society has kind of has, expectations around what Bitcoin is, and it does come across as something that's kind of technical or geeky, and it doesn't kind of focus more on the socioeconomic benefits that it has. So I think a lot of people are kind of turned off or nervous. And so they want to get into it, but it seems too technical and they just don't even know who to ask questions. They don't want to feel stupid. So just having a space for people to come and to just talk casually.
Totally. And now going from the IRL world, which these cool kids say, which is in real life, to the online world, I think this is another area. If anyone's listening and they want to figure out other ways to get involved in the Bitcoin community, and we'll put this in the show notes, but these Slack and Discord communities, just joining them and lurking and listening and paying attention and then reaching out to folks, I think this is where the consistency aspect as well as the follow-up. So consistency of being there with those consistent guidelines and kind of to enhance everyone's experience. And then following up, like for example, with our meetup, I think one of the things that made it take off was not only the topics, but our ability to follow up in a consistent manner with like hey, we're doing another meetup second Wednesday of every month. Here's a topic. Hey, reminder, day of reminder, and then so on. And then continuing to be there so that, the like how you're doing the program management, people like it oozes your passion and people gravitate towards that. And then they will then step up, in my opinion, to do better work or attend or do the thing that they were said they were going to do.
For sure.
Yeah. And so I kind of curious about the product management community because this is a fairly new community and it's different than the design community. How and why did this, it seems like this is it's like I'm working on LDK, I'm working on the design community. I'm also like working basically full-time supporting the Spiral team of I think 10 or 11 full-time employees. And now you're like, all right, yeah, of course I'm going to now contribute to the Bitcoin product management community. Like, what's going on there? I'm curious.
Yeah, that's a newer community. I actually didn't start that. Pavlonex and Connor did, I think, like July last year. And the goal of that was to basically get more product managers involved in Bitcoin FOSS projects. So to kind of do similar work that they're doing and we're doing, and to find projects that need help and to find people that would be able to contribute and to somewhat pair together, to skill share, to collaborate. And then that kind of just blew up a little bit. Like, there's like over 100 people there that
Nice.
First it was 4 product managers, but there's a lot of people like me that's not a product manager, or there's operational people, there's people of all different kinds. And so we kind of realized that like that maybe isn't like exactly because, it's Bitcoin. So it's maybe not product managers as per se and what you need in projects, but it's people that kind of can do these different skill sets and add value. And so that's kind of the goal, is to skill share there and to get more people involved and to bring more non-technical people into the space to contribute to projects.
That is so dang cool because I feel like any entrepreneur is in a way their own product manager, obviously, and I think a lot of people aspire to get into a product manager role, or they may be a product manager and they want to leverage their skill set into the open source community. So just organizing that sub group in another Discord, which I've made just a note that I'm going to be joining that Discord here shortly and lurk. That's for sure. By the way, you didn't even mention this other open source project that you work on, which is Hello Bitcoin. So like, are there other projects that I don't even know that you're working on beside, there's probably like 10 other ones.
Probably.
But Hello Bitcoin has been really interesting to me because there still is not, and this is maybe a positive, not a negative, but when somebody asks me, hey, what's the one thing that I can read or watch to learn about Bitcoin? In a good way, there's not really one thing. There's like, it's a journey, right? So you got to like read this, you got to understand all these different areas to really grok Bitcoin. And even when you grok it, you still don't get it, like me. But Hello Bitcoin, to your point around making, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that even just saying the word Bitcoin to provide a welcoming space to say, okay, here are all the things that my FUD, it's basically like a FUD buster site, in my opinion. How did that kind of start with you guys? And then I also noticed that you guys are looking for a new lead for that project.
Yeah, so that also started before my time too. And then I kind of joined when I joined Spiral to help out with community management and just program management and different efforts there. So Yeah, there's four of us. We've kind of been somewhat on maintenance mode just for various reasons. But yeah, we've produced various videos, and the goal is to have a friendly, welcoming space for people to come to and to learn about Bitcoin, and to not be around the price or the mechanics, something too technical to kind of scare people away. And so that brand's been really awesome, and it's done great things. And there's a lot of ways that it can continue to grow. So we're looking for more people to contribute. So if anyone is interested, it's a kind of volunteer position, open source, and we want to kind of keep the brand focused on being a friendly, welcoming space. But there's a lot of ways that they can go. So yeah, Hello Bitcoin on Twitter, and we kind of have more information there about that project lead role.
We'll put the project lead role in the show notes as well. Highly recommend digging into that. And if you have any questions, if people are cool to hit you up, that would be great. This brings up another area, and this is more of a broad topic. I'm always interested in the free versus paid work conundrum for folks. There's amazing work to volunteer towards Hello Bitcoin, to these open source projects and so on. But almost undoubtedly, a number of them are unpaid, right? Other than applying for grants or asking for donations. It's just it seems difficult in that way. And then there obviously is paid work. But then there's the conundrum of just doing free work that somebody's taking and then leveraging for you to, quote unquote, as a creator, get exposure sometimes is like the pitch. How do you think about that, like the free versus paid work model, if you will?
Yeah. I mean, I feel very grateful to have like a full-time position on Spiral and, be paid to work in Bitcoin. And especially in this market, it can be harder to get funding, and there's less roles. And so I think that, like, two things. One, I think that if you're really passionate about Bitcoin and kind of what it can do to change the world, honestly, it's a great way, like joining the open source community, to kind of have it be a passion project and to work towards something that you believe. And then in the process, you can meet a bunch of really cool people that are working on cool things. So that's a great way to like make friends, find a community, and that's really powerful. And also, it's a great time to also kind of build up your portfolio, if you will, of projects that you're contributing to meet people, to network. It takes a lot of time to get a job and to get paid, and that doesn't. I think a lot of people think that can happen automatically, but it takes work. So doing free work is also a great way to get closer to a paid position. We've had people that have been Spiral grantees that are now, full-time positions at, other companies, and that can kind of be like a stepping stone there. So I think it's a great way. Everyone has their own, way they manage their time and how much free work that they want to do. So that's a personal decision, but it's a great way to meet people and do work.
I think you nailed it. One of the things that Steve said when he was a speaker at the meetup was around what the grantees have done next. So you mentioned getting full-time jobs. The other is like starting their own startup as well, which has been pretty cool. So you may even find inspiration in working on an open source project. You may find a partner that you're like, hey, we've been working on this amazing together. What about this idea? And we go and productize it and build something with the open source ethos at the core of our product or service. I'm really bullish on that end.
Yeah.
I will say one thing that you guys and just in general have inspired. We need more Spiral. So like I think it was Connor on your team wrote the framework for Bitcoin open source development or sustainable open source Bitcoin development on the Spiral blog. How do we create more spirals? Because it is very difficult. You don't have a big Bitcoin focused entity to like give you the runway and support and the room to, be yourselves and build this like other places, because I feel like you have to be bought into Bitcoin in order to do this. And I shouldn't even say this on air, but we're going to figure out something. Like once we get to, there's 3 phases of the park. There's the don't die. There's like barely above water breathing, and then, shoot the moon. Once we're like above water and about to hit the shoot the moon phase, I really want to do park residency where we are a very junior, watered down version of what Spiral is right now, but like try to build something like that so that, we're basically supporting the ecosystem so it's not so dependent on one grantor, if you will, to fund. We need just multiple funding streams because it could be I think there's a way that where it becomes a competitive, not a competitive advantage. It's critical to the business in order to support and fund open source. So, for example, imagine building your entire business on BDK. Well, if there's no support for BDK, that would be an attack vector on your business. So of course you want to be one of the supporters of the BDK project. Oh, and now you've incorporated LDK. So like, how do we support the LDK project? And there's all these little things that I think will come about. And for us, we just want to support the entire ecosystem. So I think something like that in the future, probably not the near future because we got to survive first and foremost. But I think and I hope I would love to see a line of sight for other entities to do this. So I'm curious to know your thoughts on other entities doing something similar to Spiral.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely need more spirals. We definitely need more people and companies in the space that are providing funding. I think it's in order to get that, it's logistically complicated to fund people. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes to like issue grants and very methodical approach that Connor and everyone on the team who's involved take to funding people. And so I think we can do, a better job of kind of having more of a playbook to answer any questions that people might have to what we've done and to kind of make it easier for other people to start up something similar. But I also think that's a great way too for people who want to contribute to Bitcoin and they're not necessarily like a developer or designer and they don't know how. But if, you're interested in funding people, like that is a great way to get involved and help rally support and take away that logistical pressure to make it possible and more easier to pay people.
Totally. I told you this time was going to go like this, and we're well into the hour right now. But one thing, when we had a quick coffee conversation, and I feel like you do this really well, just even again knowing you very little, but it's kind of like planting a seed. Like, hey, did you ever think about this? When you ask me, hey, did you ever think about writing a post on how to start a park or how to start a community space? And I didn't really think about it, but now you kind of put it all together because so many people from different walks of life are saying how to do this. And I'm going to hold myself a little bit accountable. Tom's going to cut this segment out and then, send it back to me and be like, hey, you said it, man. You got to do it now. Which is I'm going to create the framework similar to how you guys wrote this post, but with a lot of detail on how to create these spaces, because I would love to see more of these spaces. I had Alikos and Daniela on Builders right before this. They're building out hack.bs.it on Brescia, Italy. We got folks in Satoshi's place in the UK. We got, I think it's called Bob's Place in Thailand. We got a new pop-up community space in Auckland, New Zealand. We got, of course, got Bitcoin Commons and Pleb Lab in Austin. We have PubKey in New York. I feel like there's this beautiful map of all these amazing meetups that are popping up. And they're all popping up organically, and it's so amazing. And let's call those the red dots. And then there's these orange dots that are overlaying, and they're slowly building up with these community spaces. And so I don't know why I just started talking about my personal book of business, but I'm going to hold myself accountable in the next, it's February 15th right now or 13th right now, end of quarter Q1. I'll write the first framework and I'm going to pass it along to you for review.
Yeah, you should. I'll bug you about it. I'm really good at bugging people to write things and keeping them on track.
You say bugging, I say inspiration and motivating. But thank you for that. And so we talked about a lot of things. I mean, again, I'm mesmerized by where you spend your time. I'm impressed by your ability to plant seeds and kind of, again, you're like the John Stockton, if you will. And hopefully, that's a massive compliment. Well, this has been freaking fascinating. I feel like I can go for another hour, and now we're up to the hour marker here. Are there any closing thoughts that you'd like to leave the audience with, and also please where they can find you?
Yeah, I mean, closing thoughts. If you're thinking about Bitcoin or you're like kind of nervous, you don't know where to start, I mean, feel free to reach out to me, join any community. Don't be nervous. Like, try to avoid imposter syndrome, even though I know it's real. Because at the end of the day, everyone
every day, by the way, imposter
Yeah.
syndrome. That's for 100%
everyone
sure.
does.
Yeah.
So, try not to be too nervous and just reach out to people. People tend to be friendly and answer questions, and just start slowly, learn about it. But yeah, kind of my closing thoughts is just go for it. Like, you're not going to know until you try. And so you might like it. You might not, but I think you will. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, and I'll be sure to respond.
Absolutely. So we'll put your Twitter handle, which I believe is Berkoe, Berkoe.
Yeah.
In the show notes as well. Haley, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was fun.
Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Haley as much as I did. Haley's ability to connect all people in the common purpose of building on Bitcoin is an important and noble effort. If we want a world where 8 billion people have access to Bitcoin, the capital B, the monetary network, and Bitcoin, the lowercase b, the reserve asset. I know I do. If you're enjoying the pod and want to automatically stay up to date, please like and subscribe in your favorite podcasting app and make sure auto download is on. This would also mean the world to me. Lastly, come visit us in Nashville, Tennessee at Bitcoin Park. Go to bitcoinpark.com and see all the ways to connect with us and stay up to date. Until next time.